Brodes Media.
And it's not surprising to me. There's a reason why whenever Raptors fans tried to make me feel uncomfortable, I just kept going down the same path, which was there's a reason why teams do not come back down 3-0. There's a reason why this has never happened. Say what you want about Game 4 and Game 5, but I'm not going to throw away what happened in Game 1 and Game 2. Game 3 was a toss-up. It could have went either way, and the superstar Joel Embiid in this series delivered in a big moment, which I'm not going to pretend isn't a big deal. But okay, if you want to make the argument that Game 3 was a coin flip, well, the team that had the superstar, let me say it one more time, the superstar in this matchup was the team to win. That's not surprising to me. But my point is, while there was fear in some Sixers fans' eyes on what's going to happen on the road in Game 6, I brought up Game 6 against the Atlanta Hawks last year, where everyone had the Sixers ruled out. They lose a home game, Game 5. Everyone's feeling, what's going on here? I'm nauseous. Just like after the Sixers went up 3-0 in this series, they fall in the next two. With a blink of an eye, things can change in a playoff series due to tone. Look, 3 of the 4 wins were fucking blowouts. Like, they weren't even close. This series was not as close as the 6 games will tell you, or the vibes heading into Toronto tonight will tell you. The Sixers blew them out, and it wasn't even competition for 3 of the 4 wins. I loved what I saw early on because I wanted to see how they would come out and fight early on, right? That's what it was going to be about, weathering the storm and reading the body language. If they go down 10 and they're fighting uphill, there's the uphill battle, and they really have to earn and scratch and crawl, well, then I wasn't going to feel that sharp. But they went toe-to-toe. It was a 1-point game going into half, and then the third quarter, Tyrese Maxey exploded. Joel Embiid with 33 points. The defensive emphasis that was on the Sixers today, their mindset was night and day. Joel Embiid with the 3 blocks. You didn't see that easy same scoring and that easy same penetration. It seemed as if the Sixers were locked in from tip-off, and I can't say that's how it was in Game 5 when they were at home and it got ugly and it looked like they didn't even feel like competing. It didn't feel that way in Game 4 when the Raptors took their first game of the series after falling 3 straight and showing some sort of life, because it's always difficult to put away a team in 4 straight games. So when I saw this, I'm not surprised at all. I thought that it would change because what the Sixers did early on, that didn't go anywhere. Look at the outcome and the results of your players in all these wins. What it tells me is when Embiid goes off and Harden has a good day and Maxey is electric and Tobias is playing his role and Danny Green, if your starting 5 plays their role and does what they're capable of doing, they are significantly better than this version of the Raptors. And sure, the Raptors were in a circumstance this year where going to win the championship was not their motto. They're looking at this as a great step in the right direction on where their franchise is, and that's not a wrong mindset whatsoever. I like what Doc Rivers stated after the game, which is this was important for us. I give Raptors a lot of credit because we needed this as a team. We added James Harden at the end of the deadline. We needed to be pushed. They pushed us, and they got us into an area where we had to sack up. Of course, he didn't use those words, but that was the idea and the belief on what he analyzed after the Sixers handled business. And I think that that is a fair assessment. What he did in this game, tweaked some things, looked at what Joel Embiid was capable of doing defensively. You talk about a zone. I just love Doc Rivers and the way that he accomplished the goal for Game 6 and had this team prepared to play in a hostile environment. I'll claim what I claimed earlier in this series, which is Toronto Raptors fans are absolute trash for the way that they treated Joel. They'll never get get any sort of media attention about it, but I love the fact that Joel embraced it. He does the airplane, even though Pascal Siakam hits him with a mean elbow on the other end. And then once again, the fans start cheering for an injured player like they did in a previous series when they were playing against Kevin Durant and Golden State. But of course, like I mentioned, they don't get the attention. And, it kind of seems like, honestly, that this Game 6 game is already somewhat underneath the radar because of what the Eagles' moves are doing. Moral of the story is Toronto fans are absolute garbage, and that's reality of the situation. Danny Green, 4 threes, awesome. Tobias, 19 and 11. Maxey, the three. Oh, man, when he takes those threes and he's so deep, it's beautiful. 25 points, and by the way, 8 assists. James Harden? Yeah, that was great. He answered the bell big time. James Harden finished with 22 and 15. And that dunk in the first quarter, what? I thought that resembled what Danny Green did a little bit ago where he got up big time and you saw the monster reaction. James Harden getting up, that's everything I needed to know. What was James Harden going to look like? Would he be passive? Would he be looking up shots, passing up shots, constantly looking for his teammates instead of going downhill? Allen Iverson was pretty vocal over the last couple of days, whether it was John Clark, whether it was Mikey Miss, and I just wonder if, not only that, Joel Embiid, after Game 5, mentioned that I didn't like maybe throwing it in Doc's way, but he did mention that this dude needs to be more aggressive. And it's not to the point where we need to demand 30, but what we need to demand is this: stellar, excellent, timely shooting and timely aggressiveness while factoring in getting everybody else involved so Danny Green can get hot, so Tobias Harris can do his thing. Toby has been a dog this series. I have no idea what to anticipate against the Miami Heat. Kyle Lowry's banged up. Jimmy Butler's banged up. But so is Joel Embiid. And I think he needed a couple of games where my number one problem with what I've seen with the Sixers over a little bit of time was really their mindset and their approach with the game. They just figured that they'd win. Really, Games 4 and Game 5, and maybe not as much necessarily Game 4 because it's that hard to sweep a team. There's a reason why there's not many sweeps in first rounds and why we're baffled that the one that is as eye-popping as it is happens to be Kevin Durant, Kyrie Irving, the Brooklyn Nets against the Boston Celtics, who the Boston Celtics definitely are filled with pop right now and filled with some fire, and they're a damn good basketball team rolling at the right time. There's no better time to be playing as strong as the Brooklyn Nets are. But Game 5 was just a miserable way to step onto the floor. They just assumed that the fan base would get them going and that the entire the organization and just the entire Wells Fargo Center is probably the proper thing to say here is they just assumed that environment would be what would push them over the edge. Just roll the ball out and everything will be just fine. But with Game 6, the way James Harden was so focused and ready early on, I think that almost described what I was going to be looking for. And then, of course, the cherry on top was how much they outscored their opponent in the third quarter and in the second half. It was a takeover. Joel Embiid learned how to play with this thumb. He had to grind through it. This is number 2. Number 1 was approach. Number 2 was, all right, Joel Embiid had to learn what he can and cannot do with this thumb. We saw points in the paint explode for the Raptors in Game 5. We saw them target Joel and said, we will target you. We will attack you. We will go after you. And then their aggressiveness defensively at times, I thought, drew defenders out by the perimeter, easy blow by, and they were getting buckets that were nonchalant and disappointing. And of course, when it comes to turnovers, that was something that ate you alive. Now, there was a time where the offensive boards, it was brutal, but that's not going anywhere. Just remember that. This team, it's just a part of who they are. We've seen them play enough where there's no fixing that. There's no glue. There's no gorilla glue to stop that from occurring this season with this current squad. So you have to work around it. You have to limit those turnovers. You have to maximize as many defensive boards as you can. Other teams will get second chance opportunities, but limit them as much as humanly possible, even within that flaw, and work and grind your way. but everyone had their role, baby. Danny Green, Matisse Thybulle, poor Matisse. It's going to be fascinating how to rework him into everything. His defense is important on a team that is thin, but so is Danny Green spacing. And what Danny Green has done this year, it's wild. Not just him, but Tobias Harris. Two guys that have been mocked, and at times reasonably so, right? I mean, when you play that poorly and you are that bad, and it seems you are so damn washed, well, then you deserve the words that are said by sports fans in your current city that is unhappy with your production. Well, when the bright lights get hot and when you realize that everybody's watching around the NBA world, both of them in a lot of games now. It's not just one. It's a lot of games now. They have been consistently playing their role at a really sharp level. I know Danny Green missed a couple shots in Game 5 that irritated people, but all around, I mean, he gave you 4 threes in that game and gave you the professional spacing that you were looking for. The Danny Green experience has been very important to the spacing and how this team has been able to operate. I kind of figured that eventually the number game will play its course out. History's going to be made. History, I can smell it. I don't smell it. No one's ever done it before. They were 3-2 up after 5 games. It's a good position to be in. No matter what the circumstance was. It wasn't an ideal circumstance. Absolutely not. There is reality to this, though. What they did in the first 3 games, specifically the 2, to wax that ass, that happened for a reason. That wasn't a fluke. I can make the argument what happened in the previous 2 Raptors wins were more fluky than the dominance that was on display by Joel Embiid and the Sixers. So you got your James Harden experience. A couple games we're going to nitpick and destroy because he wasn't good enough. A couple games where he did just fine and others truly stepped up. And then you got your game where he was a huge part and a big-time reason why they closed out as strongly as they did. And let's point out Maxey, who's been going through some growing pains in this series. There were some times where it was tough and they were really grinding, and it looked like Nick Nurse find a way to stop the bleeding and make sure they did as much as they possibly could to stop that speed. Well, Maxey in a closeout game was crushing big shots. His speed was electric. He was getting to the rim, and he got challenged by Doc Rivers again, questioning how many times your fingernails touched the back of the backboard, and called him out and said, "We need more from you, Tyrese." And he was awesome. So here's a 21-year-old in a closeout game on the road getting a masterful performance in there and really helped out James Harden and an Embiid with a nice role. Everyone really did have their nice role today, and it's really impressive when that's the case because you could see what the ability is and how much you can score and how much you could dictate the pace when that's the case.